Hello and welcome to The Punch. I'm David Penberthy, and joining me on the panel today are Punch Deputy Editor Tori Maguire, Punch columnist Luke McElveen. And in a week where the role of women in politics has dominated national debate, we're joined in Canberra by the Minister for the Status of Women, Tanya Plibersek. Now we'll start with you, Minister, on the big political story of the morning, obviously, the appointment of Kim Beazley as Ambassador to Washington and Brenda Nelson as the Ambassador to the European Community. Now, without wanting to sound too cynical, some people could look at this as a bit of a crafty political mover where the Rudd government has lined up a former leader of the Labor Party, former leader of the Liberal Party, and appointed the pair of them to two plum posts overseas.
Oh, well, these men are both huge contributors to Australia and they've both got a lot more to offer. Both of them have great contacts, Kim in the United States and I'm sure Brendan in Europe as well. I believe they're excellent appointments and I believe both men will make an enormous contribution.
So you don't think that anybody will look at it? I mean, obviously Kim Beazley for a long time has been widely regarded as someone with very good contacts in the US, but with the sudden emergence of Brendan Nelson in what was a very well-kept secret, it brings with it the handy bonus for the ALP that it causes a very awkward by-election for the Liberals in Bradfield. Is part of it political strategy?
No, I think it was very clear that Brendan Nelson was ready to leave politics. He's made that clear over some period of time. And I think this is a terrific way for someone who really is a great bloke. I know that Luke and Tori and David, you would all have dealt with him as a Member of Parliament over the years. You know that he's a very intelligent man, he's a very decent man, he's a very patriotic man, and I think he will clearly be a very good representative for Australia. And you yourself, David, just mentioned Kim's friendships and connections in the United States. Kim is someone who for decades now has made particular effort to connect and at a real level of detail with our colleagues in the United States on both sides of politics in the United States. He's well liked and well respected there, and he'll be a very strong advocate for Australia's interests.
No one would be disputing the decency of either man or the fact that they are well liked, but there have been, there's a bit of a sense, probably pretty strongly within the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, that it's a bit heartbreaking for, veteran, seasoned career diplomats to be sidelined by these sort of high-profile, almost celebrity political appointments.
I think the question is, are these men competent to do these jobs? And clearly they are. Clearly they will be fantastic advocates for Australia's interests overseas.
Look, I want to turn now, Tanya, if I can, to the events of this week in Parliament. You really shot to prominence on Tuesday with the debate about the role and the profile of women in the Parliament. The Libs were accused in a piece in the Sydney Morning Herald of not letting their female parliamentarians ask questions. They moved a censure motion against you, having the effect of trying to silence you.
A gag motion, yep.
A gag motion. Externally, though, do you think that this added anything to the debate about the role of women in politics, or was it just an exercise in political point scoring?
Well, actually, the issue about the gagging and how many questions Liberal women get to ask, the fact that they don't get to ask their share of questions, was not the point I was making that day. I was answering a question about workplace relations and how women need, and Australian men obviously need, a decent workplace relations system, and that Australian women are more likely to rely on awards than Australian men. So the return to individual contracts, which the Liberals are proposing, would be very damaging for those women who are reliant on awards and so on. And I was responding to something that Wilson Tuckey, everybody's favourite backbencher, well-known feminist, he said that all Australian women want to work part-time on the weekend when Dad's home with the kids. And I was making the point that many Australian women do want to do that, but they need decent protections for their pay and conditions, but also there's a whole lot of women who want to work full-time. And the point I was making was about the Liberal Party being out of touch and stuck in the past in their industrial relations system. And that became, when they tried to stop me making that point, that became an issue about them gagging women, them not allowing women to talk in the Parliament. It was really curious that, in fact, I was making an entirely different point about industrial relations. I was using the website being 2 years out of date as an illustration. I mean, the fact that they can't keep their website up to date is neither here nor there, except it shows how stuck in the past they are. And then it became, because they tried to gag me, it became a big sort of deal about how they don't let women talk. That was their decision to pursue that route.
The overall tone of the debate, it was sort of pretty macho and lots of name-calling and abuse and people being threatened with eviction and so forth. I mean, if both sides of politics are going to try to attract more women towards getting involved, do you think, though, that the overall sort of atmospherics of the day wouldn't have helped that cause any?
Well, I don't think it ever does the Parliament and Australian democracy any good when people see on TV the House becoming rowdy. I think it's a very poor thing when that happens, and I don't think it serves democracy very well. But it's pretty outrageous, really, for them to try and gag a perfectly legitimate answer about industrial relations and protection for women workers. And I think that the opposition came into the Parliament this week with a more belligerent sort of tone to them. I think that their tactics committee had decided that they were going to muscle up a little bit. They were going to be a bit more macho in their tactics, and frankly, I think they decided to launch that new face of muscular argument in an answer on industrial relations that I was giving. I can't prevent them from doing that. That's democracy.
Minister, do you think that taking out the muscular side of the argument, do you think it's more difficult for women in Parliament to get into a good start with each other without it coming across like a bit of a kind of schoolyard brawl? I mean, I know this is... I certainly don't think that this is a fair assessment, but plenty of people watching Parliament, when, women are going head-to-head on a particular issue, think that it has a sort of, game on moles sense about it. And, last year, I think it was you that was on the receiving end from Julie Bishop of a sort of, cat claw type gesture. How are women supposed to go in there and have a really robust political debate without appearing like they're being bitchy?
It's a really complicated question about public life, because the reason that women and men go into politics is because they have strong views about how the country should be run and how it should be run better. And it is completely unreasonable to expect women not to express those strong views in a way that is clear and clearly articulates what it is that they think needs to change. I think there is still a little bit of a perception issue where, when women are strong in their arguments, there are some people in the community who respond poorly to that because it challenges the roles that they think women should occupy. But I think as long as all of us, men and women, are fair and don't resort to name calling and actually focus on the issues rather than the personalities of the people that we disagree with, I think that robust debate is not just acceptable, I think it's necessary to our democracy. And I guess if there are people who are made uncomfortable by that in the Australian community, the fact that we have 2 deputy leaders of parties that are women, that we have so many women in leadership positions now, will probably acclimatise them to the fact over time.
Do you think that, I mean, one of the best performers obviously is Julia Gillard. Do you think that she'll be the first female Prime Minister of Australia?
Well, I think that she's an absolutely first-rate performer. I think that she plays a fantastic role in the government, both in the public presentation of the government, but also in the policy development and administration behind the scenes. I think she has the clear capacity to succeed Kevin Rudd one day, but I'm certainly hoping that we'll keep. Yeah, I'm certainly hoping that we'll keep Kevin for the long term.
mean, it's just an issue that's been kicking around for, well, particularly in the last few weeks, but for a number of years. The idea of women serving on the front line in military positions, and by that I don't mean in support roles, I mean in hand-to-hand combat in a situation where they could either kill an enemy or face being killed themselves. What's your view on that?
Well, I think that the debate's been a very interesting one. What we've said as a government is that we will ask for scientific evidence about the jobs that, the very few positions that women are barred from at the moment, and we will make an assessment of the physical strength and capacity, the endurance and other features that are required to perform that role. We'll clearly codified what it is. You know, if you need to be able to march 25 kilometres in a night with a 50 kilo pack on your back, then that should be a job requirement, not your gender. That has sparked some controversy from people saying that women shouldn't serve on the front line. The actual truth is that women serve in a whole range of combat positions already. They are fighter pilots, they are helicopter pilots, they are soldiers, they are sailors, they are medics. If you're a medic and you're part of a team that's fighting, you're on the front line. There is no question.
I'll just ask that. Why would you need to have a review then, if that's the case, if they're already serving in that capacity?
Because there are a few positions, a few specialist positions, like being a member of the SAS, like being a Navy clearance diver, that are barred on gender grounds. And my view is that if you can meet the physical requirements, the intellectual, the psychological requirements of those jobs, it should be that the job should be open to you on the basis of your ability.
Could you see a situation in the future where women could serve in the SAS in those sort? I mean, they're a pretty dangerous outfit. It doesn't get any harder than being in the SAS. Could women, if they pass these tests, be accepted in the SAS?
Well, I think it is really tough work. It's really dangerous. I don't know that there are a lot of women clamouring to do it, but I think if a woman has the capacity to do it and she is able, she meets the physical, emotional, psychological, intellectual requirements of the job, then of course she should be allowed to make that decision for herself. There are very few areas where we make these sorts of decisions for people, and I really do think that given how many, I mean, more than 90% of jobs are open to women in the Defence Forces already. There are already women serving in our front lines. We've had women in Iraq, we've had women in the Gulf, we've had women on peacekeeping missions, we've had women serving in very dangerous situations in the past. And frankly, I think returning to a discussion where we say, are women able to serve on the front line, really ignores the fact that we have some very highly skilled defence personnel who are women, and that they should be able to mark out their career, to plot their career in the Defence Forces based on their ability.
Tanya Plibersek in Canberra, thanks for that. We're going to take a quick commercial break and we'll be back with more on The Punch after this.
We're watching every move our leaders make 7 days a week. Sky News Agenda.
Welcome back to The Punch. On our panel today are Tory Maguire and Luke McElveen, and in Canberra, the Minister for the Status of Women, Tanya Plibersek. Now, Tanya, the other ministerial hat that you wear is as Minister for Housing, and even though this is not quite a federal issue, I want to get your thoughts, if I can, on this case surrounding the convicted three-time paedophile Dennis Ferguson. Do you think that other residents of public housing have the right to know that somebody of the calibre of Dennis Ferguson is going to suddenly turn up and be living among their number?
Yeah, well, I'm a mum, I've got 2 kids, and if I had someone who'd been convicted for these offences living next door to me, I'd want to know, because it would change my behaviour for sure. It would change what I let my kids do, for sure.
The obvious second question to that, though, is if there was some sort of system, and I know that the media sometimes advocated in a fairly simplistic fashion, that communities should be told that people like Ferguson are going to be moving in there. No community is ever going to say yes, are they?
No, and this is actually, I think this issue is a much sort of more complicated issue than what happens with Dennis Ferguson, because there is a real question about rehabilitation for sex offenders, child sex offenders and sex offenders generally. Like, I'm actually really hardline and unfashionable about this. I think that as a community, you want to be pretty clear that someone has participated voluntarily in behaviour change therapy, that they've admitted that they've done something wrong, that they take responsibility for that they want to change their behaviour, before you'd feel confident to allow them to live unsupervised in the community. It is a much deeper question about what role our corrective services play. If we're not confident that they have a rehabilitative role, then we actually have some very difficult questions to answer as a community. The second thing is about how you house prisoners when they come out of jail. Now, I think that it's very important to know where, if you've got any sort of ongoing parole issues, or if you've committed a serious offence and there's a reason for the state to continue to know where you are, then being confident about where this person's being confident about knowing where this person's housed is a really important part of keeping track of them. And for a lot of crimes, actually making sure that someone's appropriately housed really helps prevent recidivism. Like, if you release someone out of jail and they go back and live on the streets with their old criminal associates, there's a fairly good chance that they're going to wind up back in jail fairly soon again afterwards. So there's the individual question of Dennis Ferguson and where he should live, but there are some sort of systemic questions that we need to answer as well about the rehabilitation of prisoners generally, what we expect people who've committed very serious crimes like child sex abuse to do before we're confident that that they can be trusted to live unsupervised. And then there's the additional kind of housing issues as well.
Your point about rehabilitation is a very good one, and I'm sure that any person watching the program would agree with you. But we saw Ferguson last night on Channel 7 in their interview with him saying that he'd never had any sort of treatment for his affliction, yet here he is 10 k's up the road from here.
Yeah, but that's David, I agree with you. I'm very, very hard line on child sex offences and sexual abuse generally. I think these crimes destroy lives, and I would want to be really confident that we don't just cycle people in and out of prison so they can get out of prison and destroy another life. We need to have a much better approach to changing people's behaviour. The other thing that I think it's really important to mention as well is there's a story in today's Victorian papers about a father who, it is alleged, has sexually abused his own daughter for 30 years and fathered 4 children by her. At the same time as parents are worried and really thinking about how they explain to their own kids this idea of stranger danger, and if you see this man, don't go near him, and all the rest of it. But as a community, I still think we haven't come to terms with enough the fact that stranger danger is really the smallest part of the child sexual abuse that goes on in our communities, and we've got a very big a lot of work to do, and it's not going to be finished next year. It's something that will take really generations for us to fix properly, that there are kids who are being abused by people they know, who they should be able to trust. And that's another part of this equation that we're not talking about because we're focusing just on this one man and this one housing situation.
Minister, do you think that there needs to be some kind of national administration or register over this? Because one of the things that has been an issue with Dennis Ferguson is the fact that he committed his crimes in Queensland, Then he came to New South Wales and somehow qualified for public housing, which is another question because there are tens of thousands of people waiting for public housing. It's surprising that he got in ahead of them. But do you think that there needs to be some kind of national approach to keeping track of these people and alerting people to where they are?
It's a really difficult question, Tori. Like, I don't know if we think that someone is genuinely dangerous, then I don't know that just naming them and letting their neighbours know where they live is really the appropriate response to that. I mean, it does. I would want to know, because I would, as I said earlier, I would change my behaviour. I wouldn't, be letting the kids walk to the shops on their own if they were walking past the home of a convicted child sex offender who had not undergone treatment, who didn't show signs of changing their behaviour and being remorseful and all the rest of it. The question of how you use such a register, who would have access to it, what it does, do police then go around and notify neighbours? Do you get to look on the website and name people who've been convicted 30 years ago and never reoffended, and their lives ruined and they're chased out of town again? And there are some very complicated questions around that.
Minister, sorry to interrupt. Just how do you rate the performance of the New South Wales government on the Ferguson case? I mean, really, it's been 3 days of absolute farce. The only reason the guy is now left is presumably because people have started dropping off makeshift coffins on his doorstep, as we saw last night. Yet the state government has appeared to be completely powerless and uninterested in making other arrangements for both him and the residents around him. Could this have been handled better by the state government?
Well, I actually think that New South Wales has a really very good housing minister in David Borger, and I think he's been presented with a very complicated problem because he has no legal power to move this guy unless he breaks the terms of his lease. I mean, I think the question of why he was located in this place in the first place is a more difficult sort of question. But the minister, I think, has, he's been landed with this terrible problem to solve on his doorstep, and the impression he gives me is that he's working very hard to solve it in a way that does meet the needs of the residents of Ryde. He is very well aware of the concerns of the parents and families in that area.
Yeah, look, I don't think anybody's saying that there's any easy solution, and it's been a shocking case. But look, we're out of time, Minister. So, Tanya Plibersek, thanks for joining us today in Canberra. And our panel, Luke McElveen, Tori Maguire, thanks for coming in again, guys. We are probably going to be back again next week with a special version of The Punch, and we look forward to joining you then. Thank you.